I think one of the most important things in the United States is we have enshrined in the First Amendment 5 fundamental rights. The first one being the right to freedom of religion. I think it's important to remind Americans of that fundamental right, to call on the best of America, the better angels of our nature. I think we tend to forget that there are good people on both sides. One of the things, I'm surprised Jonathan Haidt's not on this panel, but Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Righteous Mind, which is an extremely important book. And another really important book is Arlie Hochschild's book from UC Berkeley. It's a brilliant study. She went to the place that fewer people voted for Obama than any other place, right? Louisiana, 16% of the white people voted for Obama. So she wanted to get into the minds of these people, and she went there. And what she was surprised to find was she actually liked most of the people that she talked to, the Trump supporters. And so I think when we demonize the other, just like Muslims are being demonized, when we demonize the other and we create these Manichaean worldviews, we set up ourselves really for constant conflict. And another aspect, if you look at somebody like Andrew Breitbart, who was a liberal who became a conservative, or somebody like David Horowitz, who was an extreme liberal, became even a lot of the neocons were originally Leninists, and then they became extreme conservatives. If you look at somebody like Andrew Breitbart, who founded Breitbart News, that had a lot to do with Trump getting elected, Breitbart wrote a book called Righteous Indignation. And one of the things that he points out in that book is that when he went to the university, most of what he heard in the social sciences was what he considered anti-Americanism, how horrible white people are, we're a genocidal people, racism is in our DNA, in other words, it can't change. Somebody like Sessions makes a joke 30 years ago that undeniably was a lousy joke, first of all, but also was a racist joke. But 30 years ago, he's still a racist. You know, so it's not allowing for development, allowing for people to actually change and grow. So I really think that the allies that we're looking for, you know, Marx said, workers of the world unite. I would say intelligent people of the world unite, which is a problem because like Adlai Stevenson said, when somebody said you have every intelligent American's vote, he said it's not enough, I need a majority. I think the cultural argument, which includes all of them, because if you look at Stephen Bannon, who I think really is the mastermind behind this whole thing, and if you understand what he understood, because after Trump got elected, I went and watched every documentary he made. I read his speeches. I really wanted to understand what happened. And he tapped into something so powerful in the United States. And so many people from the beleaguered, what are called the nickel and dimed people. There was a book a while ago. It's a great book, that these people really feel they're not in their country. That's why Hochschild's was called Strangers in Their Own Land. And they see it religiously in terms of their culture, their religious culture. So a lot of things like transgenderism suddenly became a really important issue, which the vast majority of Americans, it's not something they even come into contact with in a place like Louisiana or Mississippi or a lot of these places. And so they really, I think, they feel like their culture is under siege. And if you want to see a really interesting documentary, which is called Free Speech Apocalypse, which is about this man, Douglas Wilson, who's a Christian apologist, went to a major university and tried to give a speech on heterosexual Christianity. He was literally, the entire speech was just shouted down by people with what they call liberating intolerance, and was not able even to talk because they said it wasn't free speech, it was hate speech. And this is really what the deplorables, who have now taken that as a badge of honor, adorable, deplorable. I mean, that's what they call themselves. And just about the multi-ethnic, you know, you mentioned we're more America has always been a multi-ethnic society, and every group that has come outside of the Anglo-Saxons, every group that has come has had, in a sense, to duke it out on the street. And the Irish Americans, When the Irish Became White, is a very interesting book about how difficult it was for Irish Americans. Daniel O'Connell argued to the Irish American leadership that they should ally with the African Americans in the United States because they were fighting a common enemy, which was the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon leadership began to integrate the Irish into and make them police, to start policing the African American community. So divide and conquer has always been a strategy amongst leadership in the United States. But the millennials, and I think we should be very hopeful about this, the millennials are far less absorbed in the race issue. And I think that as the dinosaurs and the supremacists die off, and I think they will die off, I think we're going to see a very different world. It's going to celebrate diversity more than denigrate it. Well, I'm gonna be hopeful about it. Just from my own experience teaching young people for over 30 years of many, many different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, including I worked as a prison imam with entirely African American. So I'm very familiar with the struggles. This has been a very, very long road, and we're far from where we should be. I totally agree. And the reasons for it are extremely complex. And cannot be simply reduced to race. There are many, many variables in the issue, and it's a very complex issue, and it's difficult even for people outside of that to speak about it. But I am hopeful from what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm in California. Pat Buchanan said it's the Quebec of America, right? So in some ways, we're the weirdest people in the world. But I think California is a place really where, I mean, Berkeley's a good example, but Berkeley is probably the most progressive university in the United States, and yet still about 80% of the professors there are white.
That's right.
So it's undeniable that we do have a problem.
That's right.
Just, I think, you know, as a believer, I'm always supposed to see light at the end of the tunnel. I'm just a little worried in the next few days it might actually turn out to be an oncoming train certainly for Muslims. But I would say it's going to test the institutions in our country like they've never been tested. I'm hoping that they're as strong as they have been maybe in the past, not always doing the best things. But it's going to be a time of immense courage, and courage is the most fundamental of the moral virtues. It's what all the other ones are seated upon. And the daughters of courage are very interesting. So righteous indignation is one of the daughters of courage, to be righteously indignant. And I think that history always remembers the courageous. It does not remember the cowards. Thaddeus Stevens during the Civil War is one of the great Americans, and he's remembered not only for his stance against the banks, but most importantly for his position on the African American question. And the same is true for somebody. I think if you appeal to the highest nature of people, people surprise you. Henry Sweet was a black man in Detroit who was accused of murdering, you know, there's a white mob that was going to attack his family. He happened to have the best defense lawyer at the time defend him, and an all-white jury declared him not guilty because he challenged them to be empathic, to put themselves in the other. And in conclusion, one of the linguistic coincidences that I found very interesting is that in English we have other and brother. You know, it's important to see the other in brother. In Arabic, you have the akhar is the word for other, and akh is the word for brother. So in Arabic, you see the brother in other, and in English, you see the other in brother. And I think we need to do both.